Ziggy has been having a little bit of trouble fitting in with the herd that he's currently in. I'm gonna try and hurry up and close this big dry lot before the boys run in for the day.
Go back out. Come on. Go.
These boys were too excited about getting their breakfast, so my plans are gonna have to change just a little bit.
Oh, Stewy. Okay, Pete.
Last night I set up this little round pen in the bigger dry lot, and as you can see, Goose is kind of chasing Ziggy around this morning. They haven't had their breakfast yet. They really don't seem to be getting into too much trouble, but it would be nice if Ziggy could maybe relax while he's eating his breakfast instead of always having to keep an eye out for Goose.
Stewy.
I set up a little round pen in this bigger dry lot so Ziggy can spend the day in it and get used to all of the new horses. It seems like Goose has settled in pretty nicely. He is number 2 in the herd, it looks like.
Okay, Gus?
I'm gonna go ahead and turn these boys out on their pasture and clean their dry lot first. I want Ziggy to be able to stretch his legs a little bit before I put him in the round pen for the day.
I'll be back later, Gus.
I usually feed these boys their ration
Zig.
balancer first, so they're a little bit confused as to what is happening today.
All right.
I did notice last night that Ziggy did have a big chomp on him from Goose. For anyone that's new to my channel, I have been having a little bit of trouble getting Ziggy to fit in with his own herd. He does really like Studman. I think it's just because Studman kind of sticks up for him in this little herd. Ziggy is definitely at the bottom of the totem pole over here, and I'm really hoping that he'll be able to make some friends with the other horses. As usual, Tiny shows up to make sure that I'm staying right on track and not diddly-daddling.
What are you doing, Danny?
She seems extra frisky today. The weather has been cooling off quite a bit, so it'll probably stay right around 70 degrees today. So perfect Montana late summer, early fall weather.
Danny.
Here lately, I've noticed there have been a lot of big birds around swooping up Tiny's gophers, so she's been having a little bit of extra time on her hands.
Oh, Zig.
It looks like the other horses kind of pushed Ziggy off of his breakfast this morning, so I better go in and give him a little more to eat. He really hasn't been losing too much weight, but I've noticed that his top line isn't continuing to get more muscular.
Come on, Zig.
It is important that he continues to get the nutrition that he needs just so he can build up some more muscle. I put a little sneaky pile over here by the hay bale, so hopefully the other horses just think that he's eating hay and they'll leave him alone. But after a while, these boys figure out what I'm up to and come over to steal Ziggy's grain.
Turds. Go.
Goose and Gus are not missing any meals, so they definitely don't need extra ration balancer this morning.
Gus, go out.
Since Goose really is the one that's kind of creating all the drama, I probably should just move him by himself. Goose, Gus, and Studman have very similar nutritional needs, so it would be great if I could leave them together in this dry lot. It seems like Goose has fully recovered from his time being pushed around by the other horses and has now started to push around Ziggy again. Hopefully these boys will just go back out into the pasture once all of the little pieces of grain are cleaned up.
Come on. Stewy. What's up, Stu? Come on.
Stewy, Little Gus, Pete, and Whiplash are all pretty curious as to what I'm doing with this new round pen. I filled up a big water tub for Ziggy for the day, and I did put some special grass hay in there for him. I think Stewy wants me to hose him off. It's a little bit warm today, but not really warm enough for a bath with icy cold water. Since Goose has left, all of these boys have been getting along really well. Stewy still kind of thinks he's in charge, even though Whiplash is, and Pete and Little Gus just kind of keep to themselves and don't really ruffle any feathers. My plan is to put Ziggy in here for the day so they can become acquainted over the fence.
Ah, Stewy. Oops, sorry, buddy. Your booty?
It looked like Stewy was pretty interested in getting hosed off, so while I'm out here with the hose, I might as well give him a little spritz. Unfortunately, it won't be too long now before the weather turns and it'll just be too cold to give these guys baths.
Zig.
With Ziggy's pen all set up for the
Zig.
day, I just have to go out and catch him.
Come on, Zig.
It seems like some days Ziggy thinks about running away when I come out to catch him, but most of the time if I go slow, he just stands still and lets me put a halter on him fine.
Zig.
Ziggy is due for a trim, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean up his feet today before I turn him out with his new little herd. As you can see, he doesn't have a whole lot of growth, but his foot is kind of growing a little bit forward. I think it's actually been 8 weeks since his last trim, so that's quite a long time for him not having had any real growth. I simply rebalanced his foot with the rasp and cleaned up the bars, and that seems like it should really do it for him today. I might come back in another week and see if he needs any more adjustments. I'm really hoping to keep him barefoot all the way around for the fall and the winter, even if I do take him out on some rides. I was kind of surprised to see that his hind feet did have a lot of growth, even though these ones did not have any shoes on them. I have been trying to get out on the trail with Ziggy, but a lot of my horse friends are super busy and I'm not really excited about riding him all alone. Even though Ziggy is a very trustworthy horse, I don't go trail riding a lot around here. A lot of the trails out here are not flat, so there's a very good chance I could wander into some pretty serious terrain without even knowing it. I noticed on this foot that Ziggy does have a little bit of a corn at one heel, and I think his foot is a little bit on the sensitive side. His hoof balls on these back feet are extremely thick. I think since I've got him, he's really been able to grow a much stronger hoof. He's been on a perfectly balanced diet with some supplements that do help their hooves grow nice and strong. When I went to nip right on that sore heel, he did have a little bit of a reaction. I can't really blame him too much. It does look like it was a little bit pinched in there, so I'm not going to get too overly excited about him squirming. Another thing that I've noticed with Ziggy is that sometimes he gets a little bit bothered by the vibrations from the rasp on his hind feet. There is a possibility that he does have some underlying laminitis that is bothering him, but I haven't really seen him be sore. I don't know why I didn't have him tested for metabolic disease, probably because he really isn't showing any of the signs, but I have noticed that he is drinking an extreme amount of water and he is peeing a ton. I did ask my vet about it when she was here, and we were thinking that maybe it was just due to him being a dude horse, so whenever I come to get him, he just drinks a lot of water because he thinks he might go out on the trail. But one of the very first symptoms of PPID in older horses can be excessive thirst and urination. So I think I'm gonna bring Ziggy back into the vet and have some blood work done just to check and make sure that he isn't starting to get metabolic. All of the rest of the tests from the other horses I had done last week should be done by now. I'm just waiting for a call from my vet so we can go over the results and set up some treatment plans if needed. Ziggy has been a little bit extra squirmy about this leg. I'm wondering if that little bite is bothering him. He doesn't have any pain meds or anything. It is a pretty minor chomp. But Ziggy is quite a sensitive boy, and I think it might just be bothering him a little bit. Another thing that Ziggy still gets pretty excitable about is the fly spray. As long as I'm holding on to him, he can handle it, but I think if I were to go up and just spray him all over, he would wiggle around quite a bit. While Ziggy is a pretty calm-minded horse, he does do a few little Arabian things that might scare a beginner. I still do plan on moving Ziggy along, but I think I am going to take some extra time making sure that he gets the perfect home. I do ride him quite a bit, but I think he would really benefit from someone who could work him almost every day. He seems to like humans way more than he likes other horses, and he does get pretty bored if he's just standing out in the pasture. After a few little stretches for my crunchy spine, it looks like Ziggy is ready to go out into his new setup. This other foot just needed a very light trim as well, just to rebalance his foot and make sure everything was growing right where it should be. Since Ziggy hasn't met any of these horses before, it'll be good for him to have his own space in his little round pen during the day. Hopefully I'll be able to put him in it without these other boys harassing him too much. Once Ziggy was secured in the round pen, he wasted no time going right in for his little hay pile. Ziggy is a pretty smart horse, so he knew that if he just stayed in the middle of the round pen, then the other horses wouldn't bother him. I noticed Studman did come over when he heard the commotion to check on Ziggy. I was pretty surprised to see him trotting around because he is really good friends with Gus. I think probably better friends than he is with Ziggy. Hopefully he will settle down in a minute or two and he'll go back to grazing. For their very first introduction, these boys quieted down in like 2 minutes. Ziggy is completely ignoring them and just focusing on eating his hay. Pete seems particularly interested in Ziggy. He has been a little bit on the outs of this tiny herd just because he's a bit different. Whiplash, Little Gus, and Stewy have been getting along pretty well, but sometimes I see Pete standing off by himself.
What do you think? Zig.
Ziggy doesn't seem too bothered by the new setup. He doesn't seem to get very excitable over much. I really like these cattle panels because they're so strong and really easy to move around, but they do pose an increased risk when you use them with horses. Really wild horses or ones that are aggressive or meeting over the fence like this can potentially rear up and get their legs stuck. I've only seen it a few times, and that was with some really wild horses who are trying to jump out of these panels, but it's just something to keep in mind if you're going to decide to use these instead of horse panels. Horse panels are really close together at the joints, so there's no room for their feet to get stuck in them. All of these boys seem to be really calm and just accepting Ziggy's presence, so hopefully throughout the day they'll just let him kind of meld into the herd, and then later on this evening I'll be able to turn him out. Studman decided that it was okay to go back to grazing and left Ziggy to fend for himself with his new horse friends. As usual, Stewy was pestering me pretty much the whole entire time. I did want to observe Ziggy and the boys for a while, so I started in on some chores. I need to clean out the dry lots, and while I was doing this, I noticed that Pete was staying pretty close to Ziggy. The other boys went back to eating their breakfast off the round bales, but Pete decided he wanted to stand next to Ziggy for quite a while. Studman, Gus, and Goose seemed to be doing fine together without Ziggy. I will be happy if I don't have to clean up this dry lot because 4 horses do make a lot of poop. When I miss a day, it really starts to pile up, and it looks like after a few buckets from that dry lot, Pete is still hanging out by Ziggy. The other boys are still munching away. It was really nice to see Pete spending so much extra time next to Ziggy, so now I'm starting to be really hopeful that maybe Ziggy and Pete will become best friends. While Pete is a quarter horse like most of the rest of them, he is a racing bred quarter horse, so they tend to have a little bit more thoroughbred in them. Compared to all the other horses, he does act a little bit differently out in the herd. He just has a harder time getting along with the other horses sometimes. Since Stewy thinks he's in charge, he came over to keep an eye on Ziggy for a while. I'm gonna head home for a few hours and then come back and see if Ziggy wants to be integrated into this herd. Hopefully Studman doesn't get too upset about it. I think he's just a little bit worried about Ziggy since he has been protecting him this whole time. When I make it back later in the evening, I am surprised to find that Pete is still hanging out next to Ziggy's pen. Studman, Goose, and Gus are going to get their ration balancer for the evening, and then I will be locking them in this dry lot.
Gussie.
These boys don't seem too upset that Ziggy isn't with them anymore. It also looks like Studman has quieted down. Just so I don't break protocol, I am going to feed these boys their ration balancer for the evening.
Pete! Pete!
I was really surprised to hear Pete nickering for his dinner. He has never done that before. I think he may be finally starting to come out of his shell more.
Come in, Zig.
Since Ziggy kind of missed out on some of his breakfast this morning, I am going to give him a little bit extra tonight.
Say-go.
It looks like he did just fine today in the round pen. None of the horses have any cuts or scrapes or anything on them. I'm gonna go ahead and top off the water for these boys and open their gates so they can go out into their pasture for the night. After all of these boys go out in the pasture, then I'll release Ziggy and they can get to know each other out in the pasture, hopefully. Since Ziggy has been out with a ton of different horses since he worked on a guest ranch, he shouldn't have any trouble getting along with these boys. I think Pete is really excited to meet him, and little Gus comes over. I think they just wanted his extra dinner. These boys were kind of diddly-daddling tonight. They really didn't want to go out into the pasture. They just kind of wanted to stay and look over Ziggy. It was taking a lot longer than I had expected, so I cleaned out the run-in shed for this dry lot. Whiplash and Stewy were busy cleaning up all of the little leftovers that were on the ground.
Zig, come here, buddy.
I have pretty high hopes that Ziggy is gonna get along with these boys, but I'm just gonna have to wait and see how it all shakes out.
Okay, Zig.
It was pretty interesting that after Stewy chased Ziggy around for a while, Pete swooped in and tried to block Stewy from getting close to Ziggy. Stewy was not very happy about it. I don't know why Ziggy does this. He just likes to run and run. These horses are really not being nasty to him, but he's running away, so of course the other horses are chasing him. Pete tried really hard to get up to Ziggy and make friends with him, but Ziggy was just too frantic. Eventually, he made his way out onto the big pasture. It was pretty interesting that Pete was the first one to go out to join Ziggy in the pasture. As hard as Pete tried to make Ziggy his friend, Ziggy was just enjoying galloping around the pasture. Ziggy is quite a small horse, so it was really surprising that he was faster than Pete even. Ziggy's stamina seems to really help him out when he's trying to leave these boys in the dust.
Where are you going, Zig? Zig?
I was kind of bummed out that Ziggy just didn't seem like he wanted to be friends with any of the new horses.
Zig! Come on, Zig! Zig!
After letting him stand out in the pasture and gallop around for a while by himself, I decided that I would just put him back in with the other boys.
Come on, Zig. Come on in.
Goose, Gus, and Studman were a little bit on the fresh side and they were galloping around their running shed. I'm a little bit disappointed I'm having so much trouble finding Ziggy a real friend here. He's been out with Skeletor, Frisco Bill, all of the rest of the boys. I don't know if it's an Arabian thing or if maybe Ziggy just enjoys being mostly by himself. Ziggy had been out on the big pasture for about 20 minutes just loping around and stretching his legs, but these boys did not come out to greet him at all. They just stayed in their dry lot. They didn't want to have anything to do with him. Since Pete, Stewy, Little Gus, and Whiplash have been getting along really well, I didn't want to upset their little herd.
Tiny!
Of course, Tiny had to come out and supervise what I was doing. It's also about time for her to get on the shaky plate. Since I've been having so much trouble fitting Ziggy into his own herd, it does make me question whether or not I should move him along to a new home. He seemed to do fine in a stall by himself, but without the right amount of exercise, he was just walking the fence all day long. He also did a lot of fence walking when he was just in a dry lot by himself and when he was in here with Frisco Bill. Since Ziggy is already pretty broke and quiet, he usually isn't first on my list to ride every day, but I'm thinking that maybe the extra exercise would quiet his mind and maybe help him get along better with the other horses. Sometimes it can be tricky fitting a new horse into a herd, especially one like Ziggy with a kind of unknown past.
Zig! 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 Sorry, Zig.
Over the last couple of months, I have noticed that every once in a while, Ziggy will get this faraway look and just scan the horizon. I have a suspicion that he is looking for maybe a friend or a buddy that he had at the guest ranch.
Hi.
This can be a really difficult part of getting horses that you don't have a lot of history on. If he were at the guest ranch for years and years, then he definitely would have made friends or his own tiny little herd within the group of horses. When I get these rehab horses in, it is really important to me that they get some kind of friendship, whether it's just a really good buddy or if they fit into a small herd. Studman is about the best friend that Ziggy has made since he's been here, so I think for now that those two are going to stay together. Normally, the horses I get into rehab don't really care to be around people so much, so they like being with other horses a lot more than they like being with people.
Zig!
I am starting to think that Ziggy is maybe the opposite and that he really enjoys his time with people more than his time with horses. I still don't think he really cares for me too much, but since I'm the only human around, he really has no choice but to be friends with me. After a few minutes, it looked like Ziggy wanted to get back into the dry lot with his old friends. Even Goose, who was standing at the fence, came over to see how Ziggy was.
Zig. You okay, buddy?
Despite having galloped around for quite a while this evening, Ziggy didn't really seem out of breath at all. Ziggy seemed like he really did want to get back in the dry lot, so I pushed Goose to the side and let Ziggy back in.
Come on, Zig. Come on in, Zig.
I'm gonna have to get a different plan together for these boys. I might just make this dry lot quite a bit bigger so Ziggy has enough room to get away from these boys. I only have one round bale in here, and if I do make this a little bit bigger, I can put one on each side of the run-in shed, and then maybe Ziggy will be able to have some more space. It was kind of odd, even after letting him back in the dry lot, he wanted to trot away from Studman, who he is pretty good friends with. It seems like no matter who he gets introduced to, Ziggy just runs and runs because he is pretty good at it, and he has the stamina to go for a lot longer than these other horses. I have thought pretty hard about just keeping Ziggy. I would really love to learn more about endurance riding, and I think Ziggy would be really good at it. There is a pretty good chance he actually knows what to do and could just take me along for the ride. With my back giving me a lot more trouble, it might also be good therapy for me to just get out on him and long trot him every day without having to worry about him bucking me off like I do some of the younger horses. That would, of course, prevent me from getting any more horses to rehab in the future because I am pretty much at my max right now. With winter coming up, I don't think I could handle any more horses. It's just a lot more work for me, and I am having a little bit of trouble getting everybody worked right now. Ziggy spent a few more minutes just jogging around the dry lot. I do think he does just have a ton of energy that he's not getting to use. Goose wasn't really chasing him. All the other horses were just eating off the round bale. He settled in to take a little snooze next to Studman while I was dragging the other big dry lot. I think at this point, Goose and Ziggy are getting along well enough that they can stay in the dry lot until I'm able to make it bigger or find some different area for Ziggy to be in. Whiplash, Pete, Stewy, and little Gus look like they're just out grazing on the little piece of green grass that's left out there. After I'm done dragging the big dry lot, I go back to check on Nigel. I have been getting a lot of questions about Prim lately, and she is still here. I just don't post very many videos of her because I don't want you guys to be too sad when I finally do sell her. Tiny seems to be all loosened up now that she's had her little time on the shaky plate, so that means that I can finally head home for the day. As you guys can see, sometimes it's a little bit difficult finding friends for all of these different horses. I'm hoping with a much bigger dry lot that Ziggy and Goose can find a balance and they can start getting along a little bit better. Thank you guys so much for watching and stay tuned for the next video.